Morning, Stan.
Good morning, Doug.
Okay, today we are 20, well, the last word on 25b, we're really top of 26a. Ton of rabbis taught. Velu korin she'en misach. These are the people who tear their clothes as mourners, and they can't repair the rip. If you tear for your parents, the al rabo shalim do Torah, or your teacher who taught you Torah, the al nasi, or the head of the the head of the nasi is the prince, the political leader, the al based in, that's the chief justice of the al shmuos haros, or you hear about some catastrophe, v'al birkas Hashem, or you hear someone cursing God. Really, literally means blessing God, but it's a euphemism. V'al sefer Torah shenisraf, or you witness a Torah scroll that is burned. V'al Ar Yehuda, on the destroyed cities of Judea. V'al Mikdash, the temple, the ruins of the temple. V'al Yerushalayim, and the city of Jerusalem. If you see those in their ruined state, then those are all things that you tear for, and you cannot fix the tear. The Korea al Mikdash u'mosif al Yerushalayim. And by the way, you tear your garment when you see the temple, and then you extend that same tear for the rest of Jerusalem. So it's a little odd, because you would think that you see the city before you see the temple. But I guess, like, if you approach from the east, the temple grounds are on the eastern side of the city, and then there's the wall, right? So if you're approaching from the Mount of Olives, you could well see the temple first. It kind of catches your eye first, and then the rest of then you notice the rest of the city around it. So let's analyze this. How do you know that you can't repair the tear for your parents or for your teacher? Written when Elisha, the prophet, witnesses the passing of Elijah. So as is recounted in the book of Kings, Elijah did not die. He ascended to heaven on a fiery chariot, and witnessed by his student Elisha, who became his successor. So it says, and Elisha was watching, and he cried out, my father, the chariot of Israel and its horses. bemoaning the loss of Elijah. So Avi Avi's Avi Vima. So referring to Elijah as his parent, that refers to one's parents. And we'll see in a minute that he tore his clothes afterwards. So he's saying, like, I'm tearing my clothes because Elijah was like my father or my mother. Rechav Yisrael Farashav, the chariot of Israel, that refers to someone who was my teacher. My mashma, how does that mean teacher? Katan Targum Rabbi Yosef, as Rabbi Yosef translated this verse into Aramaic. Rabbi, the Tav Lahon Li Yisrael B'Tzlosei Meritichinu Parshin. My teacher, who is great, who is as good for Israel with his prayers as more like it's better to have Elijah's prayers for the people than to have chariots and horsemen. So that translation indicates that it refers to Elijah as his teacher. So how do you know that you don't? So it says explicitly that Elisha tore his clothes, right? So how do you know? How do you get from that you can't repair your clothes, the tear? Then it says, Elisha took his clothing and he tore them into two pieces. Since it uses the plural, like if I tore my clothes, and it doesn't really translate in English, but since it uses the plural, right, for the verb to tear, so that indicates that tore them into two, right? The one clothing became two. So why does it say explicitly into two pieces? Meaning that they had to remain in two pieces. In other words, they couldn't be fixed. Wait, you're talking about somebody who's mourning someone who's dead, but the tradition is that Elijah didn't die, right? So he answered, since it says that Elijah went up to heaven and Elisha never saw him again, so it's like he was dead to him, right? He never saw him again. Okay. Okay, so we also said that if you tear your clothes over the prince or the chief justice or a catastrophic news, how do you get the rule that you can't repair that? When David heard about the death of Saul and Jonathan in the battle at Gilboa, David took his clothes in his hand and tore them, and also all the people there. And they mourned and they cried and they fasted till evening. For Saul and Jonathan and the nation of God and the house of Israel who had fallen by the sword. Shaul's a Nasi. So the parallel to that is Saul represents the prince. He was the king after all. Jonathan's Beis-Din. Jonathan represents the chief justice. It's taking a little liberty here, but like Jonathan was like the number two guy, right? So in the rabbinic world, the chief justice is the number two guy. Sorry, I lost my place here. And Allah Shavli al Beis Yisrael, Kinaflu B'charav on the nation, on God's nation and the house of Israel, who fell by the sword. Elushmos Haros. That was a catastrophic news. So Amarle Rav Bar Shaba Rav Kana. Rav said to Rav Kana, Vehema Ad Havukulu. Maybe they tore their clothes not because of each individual case that the king was killed and Jonathan was killed. Maybe it was like all these things together are what are required is the minimum, the minimum event to cause tearing the Kriya. So he answered, Al Hisibiniya. No, they're mentioned each individually. About Saul, about Jonathan, about the nation, right? So by kind of separating them, each one, it indicates that each one is worthy of tearing. When we karina Shuas Haros, so the Gemara says, what is this about catastrophic news? Really? Do you tear your clothes for that. Shmuel. There's this case where Shmuel was told, Katal Shabar Malka Tracer Alpha Yudai B'Mezigas Kesari. King Shapur killed 12,000 Jews in this place, Mezigas Kesari, the Lokara, and he didn't do anything. So, like, that's pretty catastrophic, right?
Yeah.
Our answer is, Lo Amruel Barov Tzibur. How catastrophic does it have to be if it's like the majority of the majority of the nation was put to death, but 12,000 wasn't the majority, so that's not catastrophic enough. Ukamasa Shahaya, and it was, you have to follow the actual event, like when Saul and his sons were killed in battle. That was like, the whole army was wiped out, basically. When we call it now we're examining, wait a minute, this King Shapur, did he ever kill Jews? What's this idea that he killed 12,000 Jews? Didn't he once say to Shmuel, like, I've got it coming to me, I've got a reward coming to me because I never killed a Jew. So what's the story that he killed 12,000 Jews? Whereas there's Hassam Inhu Garman Nafshayu. That wasn't anti-Semitic.
No.
They were, they brought it on themselves, whatever they did. Maybe there was a revolution, or maybe they were seditious or whatever. It was like that wasn't because they were Jews, it was because they were seditious. Diamar Rabbi Yami, it kind of sounds like the Russian Revolution, it's like the Jews are all implicated, but it wasn't because they were, maybe it wasn't because they were Jewish, or maybe it was. Diamar Rabbi Yami, Rami said, Lakal Yusere de Mezigas Kesari, from the noise of the harps of this place, Mezigas Kesari, Pakashura de Ludkia, the wall of the city of Ludkia cracked. Okay, so in other words, there's a lot of commotion coming from this place. There was a revolution going on there. So Albirkas Hashem Idalan. Next rule was, if you hear God's name being cursed, you have to tear your clothes. Tilsiv. Sources: Vayavo Eliakim ben Chilkia Asher Habayis v'Shem laHasofer v'Yoach ben Asaf Hamaskir El Chizkiyahu Kurei Begadim. So this is from the book of Jeremiah, where there was a scroll that was Yirmiyahu, or his nephew, was instructed to write a scroll that was the book of Echa, and it was burned, and so they came to. So these people came to Chizkiyahu, to the king, with torn clothes. So the idea is, why they tear the clothes? Because they witnessed the burning of scripture. Tana Rabbanan, rabbis taught, whether you hear the blasphemous, the cursing of God yourself, or if you hear tell of it, you still have to, either way, you have to tear your clothes. But witnesses don't have to tear, like, if there's a court case about it, and the witnesses testify and they say, Joe said such and such, about God, so they don't have to tear their clothes again when they testify, because they've already heard it. Shekvar Karu b'Shashama, because presumably when they heard it in the first place, they already tore their clothes. B'Shashama Ma'hafe. So the Gemara says, like, so what? Now they're hearing it again. Like, if I curse God twice, doesn't that require two tearings of clothes? So what does it matter if they already tore their clothes over this? So they're saying it again. So Gemara says, I don't think so. It says, when the king Chizkiyahu heard it, he tore his clothes. He tore his clothes, but the others who had already torn their clothes, it implies that they did not. Okay, how do you know that you can't repair the tear? That was a key element of the brisa. Asya kriya, because we derive that from, just like Elisha's tearing uses the word kruim, torn clothes, so we use the same word here. So we derive that, just as Elisha, we saw earlier, tore his clothes in such a way that they would always be two pieces. In other words, they wouldn't be repaired. So here we'll apply the same thing. Now, Sefer Torah Shenister Final. And what about a Torah book that was a Torah scroll that was burned. When this Yehudi read 3 and 4 verses from the scroll, so the king cut it with a razor and threw it into the fire. So this is an account of again of Jeremiah. I'm sorry, I said before it was Echa. This is the one that's Echa, right? The Book of Lamentations. The king threw it in the fire, and so and it continues. One second. Okay, and we have, so we don't, the Gemara will get to, like, how do you know there was tearing of clothes here? We'll get to that in a minute. So first of all, let's understand what is going on in this verse. It seems kind of allegorical. My shalosh shalosh. What it means, three or four stanzas. Like, why did he only, like, what was in the third or the fourth stanza of this, or chapter of this book, that the king decided to cut out? They said to the king Yehoiakim, Jeremiah wrote a book of Lamentations. What did he write? It begins the beginning of the book of Lamentations. How is it that the city of Jerusalem sits alone? What do you mean sits alone? I'm the king. Like, like, I don't care. It's not alone. I'm still the king. So I'm not upset by this. What else does it say? She cries at night. The city cries at night. He says, I'm the king. Like, I don't have to cry. I'm still, I'm golden. Also, Judah has gone into exile from suffering. He said, okay, the rest of the people are in exile, but I'm still here. I'm the king. The ways, the roads to Zion are filled with mourning. I'm the king. Like, I don't care. Hayusar El Rosh, her enemies have become in charge. Who said that? He says, wait a minute. No, I'm the king. I'm in charge. Who says that somebody else is going to be in charge here? Ki Hashem Hogal Rov Peshaeha. They read the rest of that verse because God has spoken about her many sins. Miyad Kadar Kalas Karos Shabbat Usrafa Beish. Now he gets upset. He's like, wait a minute. He's saying somebody else is going to be in charge here. This book has to be burned. Behind it, Chsiv, and that's why it says, V'lo pachadu v'lo karos bigdam. They did not fear and they didn't tear their clothes. V'chlal debel l'mikra. That was a criticism. Like, they burned this book and nobody even tore their clothes, indicating that they should have torn their clothes. So that's how we get that. I don't know if Papa says, maybe it wasn't for the burning of the scroll. Maybe it was because of the bad news, the catastrophic news that was in this book, right? Maybe that's why they tore their clothes. Malay answers, no, that was a prophecy. Like, you don't tear your clothes over the prophecy of a catastrophe, only of an actual catastrophe. So if they tore their clothes, it must be because of the burning of it. If you see a Torah that is torn, so shenikra actually means torn. I don't know why it translates here that is burned. Maybe it's like an alternate view. Yeah, there's maybe an emendation. But anyway, you see that Sefer Torah destroyed. You have to tear your clothes twice. One for the parchment and one for the ink, for the writing. Emar, in that previous instance where the king burned the book, it refers to the book and the words. So the book is the parchment, the words is the ink. Rabbi Abba, Rav Huna Bar Chia Haviyasser. Rabbi Abba and Rabbi Huna were sitting together. Come Rabbi Abba, ba la pnuye. Rabbi Abba had to go to the bathroom. So he took off his tefillin and put them on the chair. Asai bar namisa ba lemivle. And an ostrich comes along and tried to eat them. Amar, he said, Hashtag chayvin shtei kriyos. If that had happened, I would have had to tear my clothes twice. Amalei minola ha. Where do you get that from? Why twice? It happened to me. I went to Rav Masna. He didn't know if I should do it twice. I went to Rav Yehuda. He quoted Shmuel, Lo Amrel Bizroa Uchamasa Shahaya. The only time you have to tear your clothes is if it was like deliberately actively destroyed, like by with consciousness by a person, not that an animal came and ate it. That doesn't require kriya. Ukamasa shahaya, and also has to be as similar to the incident that occurred when the king went ahead and did this and nobody could stop him. Okay, but an ostrich comes along and eats your tefillin, that's a different kettle of fish.
Is ostrich a kosher fish, Dov?
Kosher bird?
A kosher bird, right?
I think not. No. I remember if it is a bird, right?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's not. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. I mean, a kosher bird would never eat your tefillin, right?
Never.
Okay. What about this idea that you tear your clothes for seeing the ruins of the cities of Judea? People came from these towns of Shem, Shiloh, and Shamron. 80 men with their beards were cut, and their clothes were torn, and their flesh was cut. With a offering of incense to bring to the house of God. They were. This is referring to people who were had experienced the destruction of the countryside, but they were unaware that the temple had also been destroyed. So why are their clothes torn? Because they saw the destruction of the cities of Judea, and they're coming to the temple. So with their torn clothes. Said, if you see the cities of Judea in their destroyed state, you quote the verse, your holy cities became wilderness, and you tear your clothes. When you get to Jerusalem and you see it destroyed, Tzion Midbar Hayasa Yerushalayim Shemama. You quote the verse, Zion became a desert, a wilderness, and Jerusalem desolate, and you tear. Based on Mikdash B'Chavana, when you see the temple destroyed, Omer, Beis Kodsheinu V'Tifatenu Asher Hilucha V'Seinu Hayal Esref Aseish V'Chol Machmadenu Hayal Echarba. You quote the verse, our holy temple, where our ancestors praised you, God, has become is burnt, and everything that we desired, everything we loved, became a ruin, and you tear. So Gemara says, wait a minute. Korel Mikdash Mosif El Yerushalayim. Our Brisa said that you tear for the temple, seeing the temple, and then you extend it, you tear more for Jerusalem. But we asked, whether you're hearing about the destruction or you see it. When you get to Mount Scopus, you tear. The Korea al Mikdash Bifnei Atzma, Yerushalayim Bifnei Atzma. You tear separately for the temple and for Jerusalem. So this implies that there's two separate tearings, but the earlier statement said that you tear and then you extend the tear, right, when you see the further destruction. Where it says Lokasha, not a problem. Hadapag of Mikdash Beresha, Hadapag of Yerushalayim Beresha. Depends what you see first. If you see Jerusalem first, then you tear once, and then if you see the temple subsequently, you make another tear. But if you start with the temple, then you can just extend that tear for seeing the rest of the city of Jerusalem. Tanar Rabbanan, rabbis taught the Chulan and all of these tearings, Rashayin, L'Sholon, you can fix them. Ulamolulan, these are like different techniques to fix them, base them, to fold them, Logtan, to like gather them together, Lasosan Kamin Sulamos, or to stitch them like ladders, Avalolachosan, but not to totally mend them. Amar Chisa, what does that mean? Ubeichui Alexandria. What the total mending that you're not allowed to do is like a professional job that was the way it was done in Alexandria. So there they really knew how to mend garments, apparently. So and you can fix, you can repair all these things, but not to, I guess, to the state where it is as good as new. Telling Rabban Rabbi Sot HaKorea, if you tear mitoch hashlal on the mitoch hashlal, mitoch hamalal, mitoch haleket, mitoch hasulamos, if you tear like on the seam, I'm not really, can't really visualize what all of these particulars are about how the clothes were constructed, but if you tear it on the seam, or where it had already been repaired, lo yasa, that doesn't count. Mitoch ha'ichui, but if you have a garment that was repaired by the pros in Alexandria and then you re-tear it, that counts as tearing. Because the idea is ubichoy Alexandria. You're talking about the Alexandrian technique. So the idea is that if it's fixed as good as new, then first of all, you can't repair something that's as good as new. But if you have a garment that was torn for whatever reason, not necessarily for mourning, but it was repaired by a pro, that can, and then you tear it there again, that counts as a tearing for mourning because it was as good as new. You can, if you tore your clothes, you can you can invert it and then fix it. So it's like, I don't know, it's more like if you have a reversible garment, it's torn on the outside, you can turn it inside out and fix it on the inside, right? Because you hear the Gemara talks about like make it upside down, like maybe it's some kind of a garment that can be worn. There's no it could be worn upside down. So if you turn it upside down, then you can fix it because now it's not in the same place. It's not like at the collar; it's now at the hem, so it's not such a big deal. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar osar lachosa, but Rabbi Shimon says no. Like this tear, you can, even if you turn it upside down, you can't repair it. Just as if I take this garment, if it's my garment, I sell it to you, I can't fix it before I sell it, right? Because it's my garment. It's a tear that I'm forbidden to fix. Even the buyer can't fix it. Okay, so it becomes, even though the buyer is not a mourner, right? But this tear, and maybe we're talking about specifically for the seeing the cities of Judea or something like that, which is more of everybody's involved in that. Like you don't mourn for for somebody else's father, but you as part of the Jewish people are involved in the mourning over the destruction of the cities of Judea. And therefore, if I sell you a garment that has a tear in it, I have to tell you in advance, listen, the torn garment you're buying from me, you may think you can fix it, but you can't fix it. So okay. Let's figure that into the price. Tell the rabbi's talking. The initial tearing, like as we said before, you tear for Jerusalem and then, or for the temple, and then you tear it some more for Jerusalem. The initial tearing has to be at least a tefach, a hand's breadth. But tosefes shalosh etzbos, but the extra can be only 3 fingers, so like half as much. Febreuary Meir. That's what Meir says. Rabbi Yehuda Omer tchilas kriya shalosh etzbos, but tosefes kol shu. Rabbi Yehuda says no. The initial tearing is 3 fingers, and the addition is just a little bit. It doesn't even have to be measured. Amar Ula, halacha Rabbi Meir b'kriya. Ula says that we rule like Rabbi Meir when about the initial tearing, that it has to be a tefach, a hand's breadth. Halacha Rabbi Yehuda b'tosefes, but we rule like Rabbi Yehuda that when you continue tearing for further witnessing of destruction, that can be just a little bit. Doesn't have to be. Then we can follow Rabbi Yehuda just a little bit more. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught. Amar Meis Avi Vakara. Person gets the news of his father's death, and he tore his clothes. Meis beno v'hosif, and then he found out maybe at a later time he's wearing the same shirt, and his son dies. He found out his son dies. Then you can just add on to it, to the same tear. Tachton misacha, and you can repair the extra tear for the son. right? Elyon and Misachel, you can never repair, as we saw before. You can't repair the tear that you did for a parent. Mace ben Ovakar, what happens if first your son dies and you tear, and then Mace Avi Vahosif, and then your father dies and you add on to the initial tear? Elyon Misacha, the top can be the top part fixed. That was for the son, Tachton and Misacha, but the addition cannot be fixed. That was for the parents. Mes Aviv, Mes Imo, Mes Achiv, Mes Achoso. What if you find out all at the same time that you had this, your family was wiped out, basically, that both your parents and your brother and your sister, one tear suffices for all of them. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Al Kulon Kera Echad, Al Aviv Imo Kera Echad. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, your parents deserve a separate one. So, all the other family members that perished in whatever calamity this was, one tear suffices for them. And a second tear has to be done for the parents. Because you can't, because his opinion is you can't take the tear that you did for your parents and add on to it for other relatives. So in other words, the principle is that your parents deserve a separate tear. My Tama, why not? Because you can never get more parents, right? You only have the parents that you were born with. You can have more brothers, more sisters, and another wife, and whatever, and children, but you can never have more parents. So therefore, parents, it's a metaphor for, you can't extend that loss. Amar Shmuel Sarah, that we rule like Rabbi Yehuda ben Becerra. Amar Shmuel Hachid, Shmuel really say that. Amar Shmuel Halacha Gedivri Amekel Be'evel. Didn't Shmuel say in general we always rule like the more lenient opinion when it comes to mourning? So why says yeah, that's talking about mourning, but the details of tearing, that's not included in his statement that we always go with the more lenient opinion. That only goes with the mourning practices. But so how exactly you make that distinction is a little. The note here says that tearing your clothes is actually not part of the mourning process. It's an expression of grief for the loss, but it's not mourning because you do that before the burial generally, right? But the mourning practices don't start until after the burial, so it's a separate thing. Okay. How far does the tear have to go? So this probably is not, so if you're extending an existing tear, at some point, the assumption is that this is not an extension of the tear. I'm not quite sure how to explain this, but the idea is that, you tear your shirt halfway down and then another quarter down, and then for another loss, you keep tearing. At what point is this like a ruined garment, and you're just tearing something that's already useless?
Right? I've noticed that in the more reform, when a parent or a close relative passes away, they give you a little button and has piece of wear that. Is that sufficient for an Orthodox congregation?
It's like a torn ribbon or something, right?
Yeah, and you put it on, so to speak.
It seems kind of symbolic. Now maybe maybe tearing itself is symbolic, so maybe that would count. I wouldn't venture to say. I can see why I do that. I think it's laudatory that they carry on the tradition in a way that is more palatable, but whether the halacha would consider that sufficient, I don't know. It seems like a good dodge, though, right? It's you have to wear something torn. You don't have to wear all your clothing, right? You have to wear your shirt and your pants and your undershirt or whatever, right? One piece is enough. So it seems
over your 30 days of mourning, you're going to be wearing more than one set of clothes. So if you have to,
so actually, So actually, I think that the assumption is that in the time of the Gemara,
You didn't have
um,
as many
it
clothes, right?
clothes. Somebody who had two shirts was doing well. I
Right.
mean, we saw when in the laws of Chol Moed, right, that if you only have one shirt, right, then you can wash it on Chol Moed because
Correct.
you before Yom Tov and now it got dirty again, so we can't penalize you. Yeah. So where is the tear considered still, an extension of the tear? Until the navel. Some say until the heart. Alpha Bishain Railodavar, even though we can't, there's no explicit source. For this Zechodavar, we have an allusion to it. Tear your hearts and not your clothes, the prophet says to the people. So that kind of is an illusion that tearing is related to the heart. Okay, but once the tear gets down to your navel, marchik shalosh exposed the korea. So you have to start a new tear. If there's a new instance of mourning, you have to start a new tear, and it has to be at least 3 finger width of 3 finger widths away from the original tear. Now, you've only got this one shirt. You keep tearing it because you keep losing relatives. So, like, you've got no more room to tear anymore. It's all torn. There's so machziro lacharov. Then you turn it around so that the back becomes the front, and then you keep tearing for new occasions of mourning. Nismali milamala. And then what happens if it keeps happening to you? You've got no more room on the top, in the front, or the back for a new tear. So then, then you turn it upside down, like we saw before. But you can't wear it normally and then start tearing at the bottom. That doesn't count. The tear has to be at the top, so you have to flip the shirt around. But however, the exception is that the high priest, he tears his garment at the bottom because it doesn't really count. The high priest is not required to, when he's engaged in his priesthood, he's not required to tear, right? That is an explicit exception. However, he should do a tear at the bottom of his garment to indicate, even though this technically doesn't fulfill the requirement of tearing, which is appropriate because he's not supposed to, but still, it's an indication of his grief. So it's like a tear that doesn't count, basically. Palinguba Rav Masna Marukva. Rav Masna Marukva had an argument. And they both quoted the same source, the father of Shmuel and Levi. Chadamar, one said, Kol Shiva Korea, Lachar Shiva Mosif. What happens if you get the news of a second death during the period of the Shiva for a first death? Right, so you lose 2 family members consecutively. So if it's Kol Shiva Korea, if it's during the Shiva of the first relative that you hear about the second one, then you do a new tear, Lachar Shiva Mosif. But if you've completed the Shiva for the first one and then you have another relative dies, then you can just add on to the original. Or the other opinion, Kol Shloshim Korea. No, the determining factor is the 30-day period. Lachar Shloshim Mosif. That if the second death occurs during the Shloshim, then you have to do a new tear, but after the Shloshim, you only have to add on to the existing one. Maskizler of Zera asked, Man Diamar Kol Shiva Korea, the one who says that the time period is the Shiva. Am I? Why? Because you're not allowed yet to repair the first one, right? So expanding it would not be considered a new thing, right? But El Hadam Amar Haisha. So, but after the Shiva, when this is no longer an official tear, it's like now a tear that can be repaired. Okay, you didn't repair it yet, but that's on you. Like, maybe you like it with with more ventilated or something. So adding on to it would be more like a new tear, because since this is subject to being fixed, it would be like and you didn't fix it yet, so it's like adding on to it is like a new tear. But we also said that the woman can fix the tear immediately because for modesty reasons, right? So hachiname. Um, so she should be exempt from this rule, right? So since she can fix her tear immediately, so she should be able to add on to the tear for the second death, which doesn't have to wait till after the shiva. The answer is also mishum kvod isha. No, that's the reason there is because of her dignity, right? So it's like essentially, really, the tear itself needs to remain for the whole shiva. The fact that we allow her to fix it is for a separate reason. Okay, is for extenuating circumstances, but it doesn't mean that you can treat the tear as if it weren't there. The tear really is still okay. Now, Mandiam or Koshlosh in Korea, what about the opinion that it's the 30-day period that determines when you can treat this as repaired? Am I? Why is that? Because you haven't been able to fix it yet. Okay, so that works for a sibling or a child or a wife. What about the parents? We've seen that for your parents, you can't fix the tear ever. So you shouldn't. So that should be an exception. Also, you shouldn't be allowed to extend the tear for a parent even after the shloshim, right? So the answer is no, same idea. It's like really the tear, from the point of view of the tear is now gone. Like the tear has lost its status. The fact that you can't fix it is a separate rule that has to do with honoring your parents. It's not the mourning, really. It's a question of honoring your parents, a symbol of a mark of respect for them, of that you're always cognizant of their absence. But from the point of view of the rules of mourning, this tear is no longer a tear. It's not an official tear anymore. Tana Rabban, the rabbis taught, Hayosef v'veged karua lisnei hameis. If you go out with a torn garment before the dead, hareza gozel samesim yasachayim. You're robbing the dead and you're robbing the living. In other words, we're talking about somebody who, if you go to a funeral in a shirt that's already torn, so that like you don't have to ruin another shirt, it's like you're trying to get away with, to save money at the expense of the dead person, and also the expense of the living person, meaning. What is the living? Just a second. Oh, you're like trying to fool people into thinking that you tore your shirt over the dead person, but really it was already torn. So you're deceiving the living and you're dishonoring the dead. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, if you tell somebody, lend me your shirt, I need a nice shirt, I'm going to go visit my father who's sick, I want to look nice, right? And then, and then you go, and when you get there, you find, or while you're there, your father dies. So you have to tear the coat, the shirt, and then you can fix it, because it's not your shirt. And when you come home, you return the shirt, and you also have to compensate the owner for the loss in value of the shirt. Right? So like a whole shirt was worth $100, and that was only worth $50 because it's been torn and repaired. So you have to pay him back for that. But if you ask to borrow a shirt, but you don't say, because I'm going to visit my sick father who's on his deathbed, right? If you just say, I need a nice shirt for an occasion, right? And then you go visit your father and your father dies and you have to tear the shirt, then then you can't tear the shirt. So the idea is that if it's not your shirt, you can't be tearing it. However, if you told the person you're borrowing it from, like if he's aware that you're going to visit your ill father, and so he should be aware that it might come to that, and he lends you the shirt anyway, so he's implicitly agreeing that you're allowed to tear the shirt, although you do still have to compensate him. But if you didn't know about it, then you can't tear the shirt. It's not your shirt. Tana Rabban, Rabbi's taught. you have a person who's sick, and the sick person's relative dies. Ein modino shemes. Don't give him the news. Shemes yitarif dato, because it could affect his health. You think of these terrible situations where there's an accident or something, and two spouses, one is killed and the other is is critically injured, and that you have to be careful what you tell them about the other person. And so you don't do any indication that there was a death, right? You don't tear your clothes, and you don't allow women to lament, to cry, basically, in his presence, so that he doesn't figure out that there was this death. And you tear the clothes of a minor, right? So a minor is not subject to mitzvahs. If you have a 5-year-old kid, God forbid, whose parent or sibling died, you tear the child's clothes, not because he is responsible to do that, but to induce grief for him, right? So people will feel sorry for him. And you also tear your clothes for your in-laws, for your mother-in-law or father-in-law, to show respect for your wife. Papa, Tana be'evel Rabba. See, we have a brisa in this Masachat Smachot. Avel le'aniach tinok b'tochecha. You shouldn't. A mourner shouldn't have a baby sitting on his lap. Okay, why? Because you can't help it. Babies are cute, right? You're going to play with the baby, laugh with the baby. And then somebody's got a labrios, and then people come in and here's the mourner sitting there laughing, having a good time. It's not a good look. Okay, and this I think that this I have definitely seen this, that young children. And some people will not take young children to a shiva, even if they're in the family, because right, it's not appropriate.
Not appropriate.
Yeah. So we said that when you serve, the Mishnah said that when you serve the meal, the Sudas Habra, the first meal when you come back from the cemetery, you serve it on upright chairs, right? Regular chairs. So it wasn't clear in the Mishnah exactly who this is for. It seems to mean, I think the Gemara is taking it this way, that the mourner has to sit on an upright chair, on an overturned chair, on a low chair, but everybody else doesn't have to sit, should sit on a regular chair. If you go to a mourner's house, there's a bit of a strange expression. Often that means that someone is overly proud or haughty, but here it seems to mean if you're very close to the person, to the mourner, yavruhu al mitos kafuyos, then you can sit with the mourner, with your close friend, on the low chair for this sudas sabra, for this meal. But if you're not so close, yavruhu al mitos kafuyos, then you should sit at the regular table. Rava Yisrael Beimil. So Rava had a thing happen to him, meaning euphemistically, he had a death in the family. Olagabe Abba Bar Marsa, Abba Bar Minyome. He went. So Abba, this Abba whose name was Abba Bar Marta, but he was also called Abba Bar Minyome, went to visit him. Rava Zakif. So Rava turned the chair right side up for Abba to sit on. Abba Bar Marta Kafe. So Abba turned it back over. Amar, Rava says, Kama leis beidata l'haitzur be'Rabbanan. How ignorant is this student? He doesn't know the rules. Because the rule is that he's not so close to me, basically. So what's he doing? Sitting on the low floor, on the low chair. Rabbi is taught, if you're traveling from place to place and then you learn that you've lost a relative, if you can kind of curtail your business activity, you should do so. But if not, you're already on the, in the process, you should, if you're part of a delegation, you can continue to participate. But implying that if you're on a solo trip, you really have to abandon the business venture. But if you're part of a group, then you can't make the other people suffer for you. I mean, it would be nice if you could, but you're not required to. This, I guess, this is similar to the somebody else's shirt story, right? Yeah. Okay, we'll stop here for today.
Thank you. Have a good day, Dov. See you soon.